Hello.
Good morning.
What's going on? Are we waiting?
Yeah, so I think we can go ahead and get started. We have people watching.
Are you Brian?
Yes.
Oh, I see. How many people are on?
Right now we have 20 on the call. We're not sure how many more people will join us here, but there's also people watching on Facebook.
I see. Okay.
So I think our student leaders can give an opening and then you can begin.
All right. And someone's got my slides. I'm just going to say
Yes.
next slide, next slide. Okay.
Got it. Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay. Approaching your name.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending TeenTechSF's Global Youth Summit and everyone who's watching on Facebook Live. Based in San Francisco, TeenTechSF is an interactive tech community founded by Mark Robert Wong, run by and for teams to empower the next generation of tech innovators. We are committed to equal tech access and opportunities for all as diversity fuels innovation. Last year, the 2020 TeenTechSF Global Youth Summit was a virtual event held with the theme Tech and Health, Understand More, Fear Less. This year, our second virtual summit, Tech Solutions, a closer look at planet Earth, will be focused on environment and specifically how technology can contribute to making a change on our planet. It's no surprise that in recent years, Earth's natural environment has been slowly on the decline with factors such as pollution, global warming, overpopulation, and loss of biodiversity. What is new is the impact and contribution technology can make in solving such issues. And today, we have a wide range of wonderful speakers who can speak to that. And so, with no further ado, I would like to first hand it to Mark Tercek. As the former CEO of the Nature Conservancy, the world's largest environmental organization, Mark addresses the intersection of environmental, financial, and business challenges and opportunities. With the support of his leadership, the Nature Conservancy has protected more than 117 million acres of land and 5,000 miles of rivers worldwide, spans across all 50 states and 70 plus countries, and has operated more than 100 marine conservation projects globally. Currently, he's an advisor to companies, startups, institutional inventors, and NGOs, and works with leaders to achieve practical, scalable, and profitable environmental outcomes. Take it away, Mark.
Okay. Thank you for that nice introduction. And it's very nice to be with all of you today. I have some slides. So can we put the first slide up, please?
Yeah, I got the slideshow right over here.
Okay, so I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to narrow my comments on how we address climate change. And in particular, I'm going to focus on private sector leadership with an emphasis on technology, because I know that's what you're interested in. There's so many other environmental issues we could talk about, but just in order to be focused for this brief amount of time, I'm going to focus on climate and the private sector. Next slide, please. 4 topics today. Why I think we need the private sector to drive climate progress, how this should be done, how companies can do it, and then what you people on the phone can do particularly. Next slide. Okay, why do we need private sector leadership? Next slide. This is worth pausing on, and I don't want to be discouraging or negative, but it's important to understand that we really have to get moving in addressing climate change. We're not doing everything we need to do. If you look at the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see the year 2050. This is data from the UN Environmental Program. And that 7 represents gigatons of climate greenhouse gases. That's what the UN estimates global emissions need to be at in the year 2050 to achieve the so-called 1.5 degree scenario. Alternatively, the 2 degree scenario would require emissions being at around 21 gigatons at 2050. Then the UN, very conveniently, I think, works backwards and says, well, to be on those trajectories, where do we need to be in the year 2030? So you'll see for the 1.5 degree trajectory, we need to be at 25 gigatons in the year 2030. But current policy has us at 59, and even the Paris Agreement would have us only at 53 degrees. This hasn't been updated for the recent Glasgow COP. Now, this is not the only way to look at climate change. And in fact, there are encouraging things happening, a lot of them. But the point of this slide is we're supposed to be lowering emissions at a really rapid rate, and they're going up globally. And so we need to do something better and differently, hence the urgency. Next slide, please. Why is progress so slow? Most people seem to agree we should address climate change. Why are we doing so poorly? Well, first problem is government policy. I want to emphasize, I think this is the most important thing to get right. The rules and regulations which govern the economy and all behavior. But politics in connection with climate change seem to be very difficult, and our progress is very slow. We all need to continue working on improving government policy, but we don't have a lot of time. So while we have to focus on policy, we can't expect it to come to the rescue. Second, environmental NGOs. I led the Nature Conservancy. I'm so proud of the 11 years I did that. It's a great environmental NGO. There are many great NGOs. I know most of them, they're all good. But NGOs, I don't think really have the clout to change something that's so fundamental to the human economy. Third, in this chart, we also have left-leaning activists. I think they're doing an important job of elevating the priority of addressing climate. But some of the solutions the left-leaning activists are advocating for are not really getting traction right now. I think they're just too difficult. You know, for example, some activists think we have to cease economic growth. I sure hope it doesn't need to come to that, because that will be a very hard sell. People all around the world want economic growth to improve living standards. So again, policy, NGOs, activists, we need them all. I admire them all, but somehow we need to accelerate things. So why the private sector? Next slide. Addressing climate means we need to move fast. We need speed, scale, and innovation. We need capital. We have to harness technology. Okay, next slide. These are the things that the private sector is good at: speed, scale, technology, raising capital. So it's easy to see why we want the private sector to help, but why should they? Why is it in the interest of business to address climate change? Let's spend a few minutes on that. Next slide. First, it's a good way for a business to grow its top line, its revenue. I was an investment banker on Wall Street for 25 years at Goldman Sachs. There's nothing better for a business than growing the top line. Look at these three companies. Of course, you'll all know Tesla. You'll be interested in it because it's such a technology-driven, innovative technology-driven company. Elon Musk is now the richest man in the world. You know, it won't always be, well, it wasn't easy for Tesla, and it won't be easy for anybody else. Well, what a great example of how addressing climate can lead to top-line success. The same is true for Beyond Meat or Impossible Foods. Plant-based substitutes, again, technologically driven ways to address a climate challenge, our reliance on meat that has such a big carbon footprint. Bayer is here. Bayer is a little bit more controversial. That's the European, mostly healthcare company that acquired Monsanto. Lots of environmentalists don't like Monsanto, but with that acquisition behind them, Bayer wants to be a champion of so-called regenerative agriculture, to draw down carbon from the atmosphere into the soil by using largely technology-enhanced ways to improve farming. So here are three ways companies are growing their top line using technology, and to the extent they're successful, the first two already are, it's a really significant way of achieving climate progress. Next. Okay, businesses can also improve results by lowering expenses. I like the example of Walmart. I'm sure many of you know Walmart well. It's the biggest retailer, physical retailer in the world. And their whole history has been one of making things inexpensive so that less well-off people can enjoy good products. I think it's an admirable company. but because of their strategy, they're ferociously focused on costs. And they've concluded that being environmentally minded enhances their cost position. It will allow them to do a better job for their customers. They're trying to remove from their supply chain a gigaton of carbon emissions. You can read about this on their website. We can talk more about this if we have time too. Most of the ways they will do that decarbonization through their supply chain will be by using technology. Next. Rallying stakeholders. Okay, this is where some of you come in, even today. For companies to be successful, they've always needed to have stakeholders on their side. Of course, shareholders, customers, employees, community members. But that's more true today than it's ever been before, because we live in a world where everyone can have a voice through social media and other ways of expressing yourself. So management teams of companies are paying close attention to their stakeholders, and they're finding that by emphasizing climate and other environmental outcomes, that can improve relations with stakeholders. Patagonia is an enormously successful company in a competitive field, I would argue in large part because of their environmental commitments. Microsoft, I'm sure, is a company you folks admire as technology aficionados. Microsoft has very ambitious climate goals. I think they're first rate. And a lot of their motivation is they need to do this in order to attract and keep the people who they want to work for Microsoft. And on and on. Next slide, please. Okay, capital spending. This, you may not think about this that much as teens, but one of the complicated things of running a big business is how you make your bets about the future. Imagine you're running Ford Motor, and it's a complicated and competitive business. Looking ahead, Ford's had a rough go of it in recent years, but suddenly their fortunes seem to have turned around, at least according to their stock price, which has soared. Their newest CEO has made an enormous bet on electric vehicles. This truck, the F-150, is the biggest selling vehicle in the world. And Ford has made a huge bet in capital spending on turning this best-selling vehicle into an electric vehicle. And so far, it looks very good. Of course, we'll see how tough this goes. Next slide. Okay, finally, managing risk. If you don't address climate, there's trouble on the horizon, I think. So a good example would be ExxonMobil. Exxon, of course, is the giant oil and gas company. It's not a company that is favored by most environmentalists. They haven't been, they certainly were not in any way a leader in addressing climate. Well, I think that's fair to say. I think probably they would say they've done a better job than the public understands, but it doesn't really matter. In this past 12-month period, there was a little bit of a shareholder revolt. This almost never happens. But a hedge fund led a proxy fight. So shareholders get to vote every year at the annual meeting. And the vote allowed shareholders to vote to throw out 3 of Exxon's board of director members to replace them with 3 new members who would take climate more seriously. And amazingly, that campaign won. Kind of embarrassing for the company. And they have 3 new directors. Since then, I think this is a pretty encouraging story. It shows what shareholders can do among stakeholders. Since then, Exxon's come out with a strategy to do more on the climate front. The big bet they're talking about making is in the area of carbon capture and sequestration. These are they're proven technologies, but today they're too expensive to really work at scale commercially. Again, tech-driven stuff. If this could work and be cost effective, it would be great. It's interesting now for me to watch Exxon prioritize this, because they're already saying they need better government policy to make this commercially viable. So you'll remember I started by saying nothing's more important than government policy. I think one of the many things private companies can do is push for the policy we need. Next slide. Okay, so those are examples of how and why companies can address climate change in a way that makes business sense. I'll pause here to say one other thing here. Sometimes environmental activists ask companies to do things that don't make business sense. For example, a lot of environmental critics say Exxon should just get out of the oil and gas business. To me, it's kind of an unreasonable request. They're a business. The more interesting question for me is, how can we put pressure on Exxon as customers, as shareholders, as employees, this is true for any company, to pursue strategies that will address climate or other environmental challenges, but will do so in ways that make business sense. Because I don't think we can scale and replicate business strategies unless they make commercial sense. So this is what I now do for a living. I try to advise private sector leaders on this. And here's on this next slide, please. This is the little chart summary of what I advise companies to do. Now I'll go quickly here because none of you are CEOs today, but you might be soon or working for companies and have their ear. But the first thing to do is address the ESG basics. Those are the new requirements to disclose and perform well on criteria judging your environmental, social, and governance behavior. More and more companies are doing this. Second, companies should have a plan to reach net zero by 2050 or sooner and be very explicit about that. More companies are doing that. And companies should have a company-specific strategy. I mentioned a few, Ford's with their electric vehicles, Walmart's with their Project Gigaton. We need more work there. This next point, get started on decarbonization now. This is an area where I think you as young people can help. Companies have announced a lot of impressive and ambitious commitments, but they're mostly back-end dated. They talk about getting things done by 2040 or 2050, but of course we don't have time. So we need to put pressure on those companies to encourage them to do more now and sooner. Transparency. I think companies don't do a good enough job yet of just laying it out as clearly as possible what they're doing. NGO engagement. I think companies should work with NGOs. And finally, probably the most important thing on this page, again, we need better policy. So I encourage companies to push for the government policies we need that will unlock progress. Next slide. Okay, now I want to slow down. What can you do? Those of you who are participating in Teen Tech. I don't know very many of you. This is my first time in participating, but I'm told you're teens, you're interested in technology, you want to address environmental challenges. Okay, here's some advice. I'm cautious generally about giving advice, but it seems to me, you know, I'm much older than you. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned a lot of things the hard way. Let me share some advice for how you can do what I understand it is you want to do. Next slide. First, learn the science. Climate science, of course, and environmental challenges, the science behind them, they can be enormously complex and daunting in certain ways, but the basics of it are not so complicated. And I would encourage you, and I bet you're probably already doing this as tech-oriented teens, to do the reading and learn the basics of the science. Some people don't do that. And sometimes then, even though they're well-intentioned, and I admire their passion, they argue for and champion policies that I don't really think make sense. We should all aspire to be science literate on these environmental matters. So please do that. Okay, number two, practice communicating. Here, what do I mean by that? You know, I'm not really an expert, but just one person's opinion. One unfortunate thing about the way society is organized these days, and the pandemic didn't help, is people are by themselves more often. They're engaging with screens more often. And I think they're spending more time with people who are like them, who see the world the way they do, than is ideal. When I was a boy and growing up, there were no screens, of course, there were no cell phones, there was no internet. We were outside all the time and we were mixing it up with all kinds of people, older people, younger people, folks of all political persuasions, different religious persuasions. We engaged in more civic activities like bowling leagues and little league, etc. I know we can't go back to those times. I'm not advocating for that. But I think if you want to be effective agents of social change in any area or in the environment, you'll need to know how to communicate with people who don't see the world the same way you do. Speaking to the choir, speaking to people you already agree with is fine, but it doesn't grow the coalition for the change we want. So learn how to communicate. And when you have homework assignments that require you to write or make public presentations, take them very seriously, okay? I think this is my most important ask. Next, read broadly. You know, I've got some kids, they're pretty well educated, they're pretty smart. Of course, I love them and admire them, but sometimes I think they read more narrowly than they should. It's a little bit like my earlier point. Don't just read with people with whom you agree. Seek out diverse and challenging opinions. You'll have to work a little bit harder now because the internet doesn't help you. It bombards you. The same is true for me. It bombards you with stuff that you'll already agree with. Don't fall into that trap. Also, read history. Understand how humankind has addressed other big challenges in the past. Read foreign literature. Climate's an global problem. Understand what's happening around the world and how the whole world views these issues. Okay, next point, politics. I've said it several times. The most important thing to get right ultimately is public policy. Now, you're not old enough to vote yet, I think, but you soon will be. So for sure, take advantage of that. But you can already dig in, pay close attention, look for opportunities to volunteer, get out the vote, that kind of thing. We need a more engaged citizenry. It's hugely important. Volunteer. You want to start accumulating experience. Lots of times young teens ask me for help. Hey, how can I get a job for an organization like the Nature Conservancy? I mean, you might get lucky, go for it, but it's probably tough. But it probably would be easier to get a job volunteering for some local community environmental organization, maybe just cleaning up a park. All of this volunteer activity provides enormous learning opportunities. Watch how the people who organize it motivate people to get things done. Get to know people you're volunteering with. I can't emphasize it enough. Okay, then finally, I know you do this. This is what your group is all about, drive technology. We face enormous environmental challenges, even if we get everything right. We've got to hope. We can't count on it. We can't wait for technological breakthroughs. We've got to make progress now. But boy, will it be great if we have more technological breakthroughs. Look what Elon Musk and his colleagues did with Tesla. Look at the huge progress in solar and wind and battery storage, driving down costs for the gains we need. We need so many more breakthroughs like that. I think it's really exciting that the group of you are helping one another identify and go after those challenges. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I want to encourage you to give this challenge everything you've got. If we have any more time, I'm happy to answer questions, although I've probably used all the time. And let me wish you the very best for today's activities. It looks like you have a great schedule. Thank you.
So I think we have about 5 minutes, which we could dedicate to questions. We could also start the next section early, but maybe there are questions.
Yes, I have a question. Thanks, Mark. I'm a teacher. My name is Jason. And in terms of driving technology and such, with Tesla and their batteries and such, isn't that creating a lot of energy and creating that and mining and such, and then the disposal of the batteries? So what's being done to do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I say. The challenges just go on and on and on. So there are challenges even associated with electric vehicles, of course. So first challenge is for those vehicles to be, as clean as we want them to be. We want them to be powered by clean energy, renewable energy. So we have an enormous opportunity and need in America to scale up wind, solar, hydropower, I think even nukes. We need better storage to go with that so that we can phase down reliance on coal and natural gas. And then you're also correct, there are recycling challenges, but I think we can address those. Those don't seem to me to be insurmountable. There are also sourcing challenges and mining challenges. So your question is a good one, and none of these solutions are panaceas or without challenges. But if we step back and think about what kind of future we want for the world, not just for climate reasons, by the way, but for health reasons, a world with electric vehicles as opposed to internal combustion engine driven vehicles is a better world. Of that, I'm sure. But it's also true there are other challenges associated with it that we've got to address. I'm actually pretty optimistic that those challenges can be addressed, but I don't mean to be glib. There's work ahead. That kind of complexity is true for every aspect of environmental solutions. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
I actually have a question myself. I was just wondering, for teens who are interested in both tech and finance, what advice would you give them? What can we think about? What can we pursue? What can we start researching?
Yeah, great. I didn't get to talk a lot about finance today, but I'm a finance guy. I went to business school, majored in finance. I worked for 25 years on Wall Street. And so that's really the background that I bring to environmental problem solving, and it's served me well. It's noteworthy then. So you can be a technologist, you can be a financier like me, you could be an HR person, you could be a communicator. There's room for all skills. Now about finance, I would say, you know, again, if most of you in the audience are still in high school, I wouldn't worry about finance too much yet. I would worry about the high school curriculum. I would follow that advice I gave you: communicate, read broadly, pay attention to politics. But if you've got some extra time, pay attention to the business news. It's pretty easy to follow the news in any category these days. There's a funny thing about business and finance. Sometimes the practitioners make it look complicated. But my grandmother, she was an immigrant from Yugoslavia. She came to America with very little education, and she didn't speak English. And she had a pretty successful business career. She first ran delicatessens, and then she ran taverns, so small business. But the finance that she had to deal with isn't that different than the finance Elon Musk has to deal with at Tesla. You know, first of all, you've got a budget. You've got to have an income statement that produces income and cash flow. If you don't have positive cash flow, you need sources of capital. If it's borrowed capital, you need cash flow to pay that back. It really is common sense. So if you're interested in finance, I would say try not to get too hung up on the really kind of wonky esoteric stuff. That might matter later, but try to master the basics. Thanks.
And I have a question further on that. For people who are interested in, or for young people who are interested in learning more about the solutions that are being invested in today, or potential ones in the future, you already mentioned business news, but what specific books or news sources would you recommend?
Thank you for that question, by the way. Can you put up the last slide? So I have to promote my newsletter. I have a newsletter called The Instigator, and it's free, so I think it's okay for me to promote it. It's available on Substack, or it's available at my website, marktercek.com. And if you just go to the blogs on my website, it will connect you to the Substack link. But I please read my newsletter. It's short. It comes out every 2 weeks. It's designed to be easy to read. And I hope if you read it, it will keep you current on the topics that I think are most important. And I also refer to books as the newsletters go on. And about 1 year ago, in one of the early newsletters, it's about 1.5 years old now, I had a newsletter that the top 10 books I recommended for people interested in knowing about environmental and climate challenges. So please check it out. And then if you do read it and you have reactions, criticisms, or ideas for topics or questions, by all means, please reach out to me. And there's my email. And I think that's the best way for me to answer the question, because on the spot, it will be hard for me to remember all the books that I recommend. There are a lot of good ones.
And I think that's all the questions that we have time for today.
Okay.
And again,
Sarah, could I just make one comment here, because I cannot resist? I put it in the chat, but when the speaker was speaking about basic finance statements and how you need to organize a company, I just wanted to put in a shout out for Sarah and also for Colton, who lead our TeenTechSF Finance. And I might want to let the speaker know that you guys have almost $20,000 in grants that you are managing and funding, that you are managing right now.
Well, there you go.
And that you just finished doing the balance sheet, the income statement, all of those paperwork that we have to turn into the IRS and post in our annual report. The student leaders do that work.
That's fantastic.
TeenTechSF.
No, thank you. I'm sorry I can't see the speaker, but that's exactly what I mean. That is finance. So you guys are experiencing it firsthand. Also, thank you. Someone in the chat put a link to my newsletter about the books I recommend. Okay, I don't want to go on anymore. Thank you for the opportunity to spend time with you. It was really fun, and have a wonderful afternoon on the rest of the presentations today. Bye-bye, all.
Thank you so much, Mark. So that was a really eye-opening keynote. And I also personally, just like Julie said, I'm one of the finance vice chairs at TeenTechSF. So that keynote was especially inspiring for me. And so now I would like to take a quick, now I would like to transition over and introduce Sean Rosenmoss, who is part of the SF Department of the Environment, and Camille Lang, specialist at the San Mateo County Office of Sustainability, for our Civic Engagement and Public Policy panel. And this panel will be moderated by our communications member, Ashita.
Thank you all for joining, and to Ms. Sean Rosenmoss and Ms. Camille Lang for coming. I believe you both have presentations, so you can begin presenting.
Okay, so hello. I guess I am going first. So I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm not, I'm not really good with PowerPoint, and I'd kind of just like to talk a little bit. So I'm Sean Rosenmoss. I work for the San Francisco Department of the Environment. My actual title is Manager of Development, Community Partnerships, and the San Francisco Carbon Fund. So I took a science communications workshop a few months ago, and they always say, start with a question. And so my question is, who's feeling a little anxious about climate change, right? Who has days when it feels so out of control they want to stay in bed? Who has days when they're so pissed off that they're inspired to do something, right? I think that all of those things exist in all of us. And I think what we need to do, hopefully, is like, when I'm having those really bad days, you're not. And when you're having those really bad days, I'm not, so that we've always got someone on charge with climate. I hope I'm going to tell you some things that build off of your last speaker. And then always when I'm speaking to anyone younger than I am, I always start with, I'm sorry, right? I am sorry that my generation did not do a better job. I'm sorry you have to deal with climate change. I'm sorry that my history has come to bite your future on the butt, right? But hopefully, we can work together. I have a lot of confidence that we can, and make something happen. So just a little bit about me. I come from this work from a social justice background. I'm going to be 65 in a month. I got an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering in the mid 70s, when women were seriously discouraged from going to engineering school. I was told in high school that I couldn't take Algebra 2 and Trig in the same semester. And they said, because girls couldn't do stuff like that, it would be too hard. So I did it anyway, but it was a social justice issue. I worked in Silicon Valley in the early 80s. I've been an educator. So my background isn't really, we have to protect the redwoods. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. Thank God someone's doing it. But I do this work mainly for my kids, for the kids I drove in carpool for years, for the kids I worked with in public housing and foster care, because, we need to do this for our children. I'm also really involved in what I call urban environmental work, right? This is my focus. And I say urban because that's where the bulk of people on the planet live. They live in cities, and we need to solve these problems very often at the urban level. And fortunately for me, I get to work in a really progressive city, right? I get to work in San Francisco, in the state of California. Obviously, there's a ton of work to do, but we do have a lot of political will. We still have to deal with homelessness. We still have to deal with income issues and education and diminishing diversity. But climate action crosses over all of those issues, right? When we take appropriate climate action, we can deal with some of these other issues. And I'm saying this because, whatever career you're interested in, the jobs, the work, whatever it is, as Mark was kind of alluding to, education, psychology, tech, medicine, building, cleaning, design, right? Finance, all of those things intersect with climate action, right? So it's a continuum, and whatever you're doing to help solve the Earth's problems are going to intersect with climate and the environment, right? So you can feed a lot of your passions. And one of the things that I've learned about climate change and about moving forward is that we have some communications issues, right? For a long time, there was this idea that environmentalism was really just like tree hugging white guys. So we've had to overcome that, but there's also so much wonkiness. There's so much data. And I think that we haven't done a really good job of communicating that, right? And I also think it's set us back because, who could communicate? The fossil fuel industry. So policymakers have really got to do a better job of communicating, right? we couldn't really tell the story of what was going on, and the fossil fuel industry jumped in and made up a story that gained a lot of traction because they could explain it better in a way that was wrong, of course. So like, just an example, for years in San Francisco, we set goals and we said things like, we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 90% below 1990 levels by 2040. Honest to God, it makes me want to leave my body just saying that sentence. So how can how is anybody else going to relate to that? I always compare it. When I was a kid, we had Charlie Brown cartoons. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but the teacher is talking and telling the kids what to do, but all the kids hear is wah, 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 wah. And so I think that was a lot of our communications around climate. So we've gotten better as a city around communicating. And I think climate people and environmentalists in general are getting better. And again, I'm telling you this because we need your help communicating, right? We need to talk to each other. We need to talk to people who aren't bought in, and we have to communicate much better without being too wah, 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 because no one wants to hear that. And we also need to be talking about, as Mark was talking about, the technology and some of the really fabulous stuff that's going on in the world. This is stuff people need to hear about, right? This is stuff that we need to tell people about, and we need to understand so that we can start imagining a future, right? So that we're not always talking about the doom and the gloom, but we really have a vision for what it could look like. And it's not just a vision, it's happening. So in San Francisco, several years ago, we thought, okay, well, we got to do a better job of talking about our goals. And essentially our goals are zero waste, zero toxics, 80% of all trips taken in sustainable modes of transit, 100% renewable energy, and routes, 0, 80, 100 routes. The first three goals are about reducing our emissions. They're about doing less bad. The roots goal is really about pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. It's about doing more good and healing the planet. So how do we as a city use our trees, our soil, our plants to draw down carbon? So that's kind of the science wonky part of it. And we're measuring all of that. But the metaphorical part of it is, how do we get back to our roots of community? How do we get back to our roots of taking care of each other and sticking together? Because we are going to have to do that, right? I mean, that one of the things that really causes me a lot of eco anxiety is when I feel like I'm alone with this. And then I look at you, and of course, we're not alone. And we need to keep telling ourselves that, and we need to keep talking to each other, and we need to keep sticking together. San Francisco just released its climate action plan 3 days ago. It's our next iteration. We still have the same goals, 0, 80, 100 routes, but now we're really looking at how far can we dig down into those goals? How are we going to actually achieve those goals? So we have a lot of sub goals and strategies. We need to get rid of all fossil fuels. We want to use 100% renewable electricity in all of our buildings, because we know in San Francisco, about half of our emissions are coming from buildings. We also know that about half of our emissions are from transportation. So we've got to do a better job with mass transit. We've got to make it more attractive. We got to make it easier for people to use. I talked about how we're going to solve homelessness by dealing with climate. Well, we're going to build 5,000 new units of housing every year. And those new units are going to be really dense, and they're going to be next to transit. How do we get people out of their cars, right? That's the first thing, get them out of their cars. But we know that there are some people who are going to have to drive. So let's set up an infrastructure that allows them to get electric vehicles and use them conveniently. Although we don't want everyone just to switch out your car for an electric vehicle. That's not going to work. So we want to make it really, really unattractive to have a car. If you need one, yes, absolutely. But how do we disincentivize driving? How do we make it more expensive? How do we make it more inconvenient? Make our transit better so that we're balancing those things. One of the things that we're looking at as a city, which we've never really talked about, but we know how much carbon is related to the clothes we buy, the food we eat. And so how can we have more responsible production and consumption? And how can we sell that idea to residents and businesses in San Francisco? We want to reduce food waste. We want to embrace plant-rich diets. We want to convince everyone. So everything I'm wearing comes from a thrift store. I hope everything you're wearing comes from a thrift store, right? How do we convince people just to stop consuming so much? because that's a huge environmental impact. And back to roots, you know, we've got a lot of plans for how we're going to enhance and maintain our urban services, our trees, our plants, our soil, so that we can sequester carbon. But part of that is, you know, when we're talking about urban forests and pulling down carbon, we want to make sure that every neighborhood has green space, right? We want to make sure that that carbon sequestration is about more than just drawing down carbon. It gets back to the whole idea of equity and fairness. So if my neighborhood has a park in it, your neighborhood has a park in it, right? Because otherwise it's not going to work. So that's some of the action that the city is doing. And for me also, that helps with eco-anxiety is this idea of getting into individual action. So you can look at the city's goals, 0, 80, 100 roots. You can say, what am I doing personally about those goals, right? How can I lay zero waste over what I'm doing? What am I doing around transportation? I assume most of you are probably on mass transit if you live in this city. So you can lay that over your own lives, but individual action is only going to get us so far, right? Don't stop that. And again, with the communication, right? I talked about the fossil fuel industry and how we didn't communicate very well and they did. One of the things we know now is that the fossil fuel industry spent a lot of time on getting this messaging out that it was all about individual action, right? Telling us that, well, we can't really do anything, but you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. That's true. Lots of individual action, but and they spent a lot of money trying to make us believe that it was all about us. We can eat less meat, eat no meat, but that doesn't get at the policy work and the advocacy that needs to be done. That doesn't put the responsibility on the people who really need to be taking responsibility, which are big corporations, right? All of our individual action is not going to get them to change, unless our individual action, of course, involves yelling at people, marching, voting, sending letters. The other thing is, it doesn't help government do its job, right? Our job is to serve the people. And so we also have our work that we need to do in addition to relying on your individual actions. So, you know, since our job is to help people, we do want you to feel like we've got your back. If you live in San Francisco, we as a city want you to feel like you're not alone in this fight, that we're all in this together. And I know a lot of other cities, you're going to hear from San Mateo. I know that they have that same idea that we need to feel like we're working together. But if you don't feel like we have your back, if you're not feeling like we're moving fast enough, if you're not feeling like we're doing enough, show up and demand that we do better. We're your government. That's our job. Show up and demand that we move faster. Fortunately, at the moment, we do have a federal government that is really interested in climate change. It's still not enough, right? We still have to march. We still have to vote. And one of the things that I always talk about is when we're out there marching, when you're out there with your friends, you know, protesting or whatever it is you're going to do. And I know you're going to hear from some major activists later on today. When you're out there, crank up some good marching music, right? Dance, sing, laugh, have some fun, because I assure you, climate deniers hate to see that shit, right? They'd be more than happy if we continued with this argument of doom and gloom and it's so grim. And yes, those things are true, but we're going to have some fun. We're going to have to mix joy in with the courage, or we're not going to be able to go much further, right? It's going to be exhausting. But again, it always really pisses off the right when they see us having fun. There's also, you know, I talked about some of the technology that's available and the stories that we're telling. There is so much going on. Mark talked about it. I do a lot of work with the Department of Energy for the federal government. I do a lot of work with our California Energy Commission. Check those two places out, man. You will be amazed at the stuff that's going on. Renewable jet fuel, sustainable jet fuel, battery technology that's going to be cheaper and cleaner and recyclable. That's going on in California. That's going on all over the country. That's going on all over the world. And we need to know those stories so we can start telling people about them. And just one very small project. I go to New Orleans a lot because my family is there. So a bunch of college students in New Orleans were very concerned because there wasn't a big market for recycling glass. And the waste haulers stopped picking that up. So they developed this technology, if you can call it that. They were grinding down the glass until it got back to the level of sand, putting it in sandbags. And those are used all over New Orleans, right, for flooding and resiliency. Flooding is happening all over the world. So the federal government has given that project $700,000 to look at how do you scale that up? How can we as a country scale that up? So we're recycling glass and we're using this glass in sandbags as a resiliency measure. That's just one tiny story. Those stories are happening all over the world. I talked about our soil and carbon. One of the biggest projects I'm working on is this idea of soil carbon sequestration. We know when we put our compost on rangelands and ag lands, that soil draws down a lot more carbon. It pulls carbon emissions out of the atmosphere. It's not the only solution, but is one solution. So it makes our soil healthier, this compost. It doesn't need as much water, right? It helps the soil retain water. We don't use as much fertilizer. And one of the things we found out in the fires is that vineyards that were using San Francisco and Bay Area compost did not burn as badly. They were more resilient to the fire, probably because the soil was better and the plants were healthier, right? And so that's easy, man. That's just throwing your banana peel in your green bin. That's something that we can all do in a minute. So again, those are positive stories. I want to get them out to people. I want you to get them out to people. I want you to march. I want you to vote. I want you to tell us what to do in the city so that we can help. And so, to wrap up, individual action, compost, use plastic straws, learn about climate change, talk about climate change, march, vote. And also share your climate grief and your shock and your overwhelm. I have it. Maybe you have it, but we need to kind of pledge to lift each other up and get through it, because it is going to take courage. It's going to be a long ride, right? We have to support each other. So I'm just going to close by quoting our U.S. Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman. New dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Thank you.
Thank you to Ms. Sean Rosenmoss for giving us that presentation. Now we'll hear from Ms. Camille Lang from the San Mateo County of Sustainability. So if you'd like to begin your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Ishita. And thank you, Sean. Oh my gosh, I could not have pictured a better baseline to follow up on. I'm going to keep my presentation super brief so I can actually get a chance to talk to both of you in a moment. But very quickly, you can see in my Zoom background here that my name is Camille Lang. My preferred pronouns are she and her, and I'm a resource conservation specialist with San Mateo County's Office of Sustainability. Sean did such a great explanation of what local government is working on to get things better than they are now. And I also wanted to start my presentation by saying I'm sorry. It's something we're working on together, and it's not always the way that we want it to go. And I just appreciate the humbleness of understanding that, I'm responsible for what things looked like before this. And I'm grateful to see so many people in this space wanting to work together to build a more sustainable future. This is my About Me slide. Very briefly, you can see there's lots of green and blue. I'm from the Bay Area. I grew up here, and it was from immigrant parents taking me outside and doing like the frugal option, where I ended up enjoying so many different outdoor spaces that are unique to the Bay Area. The redwoods, the oak woodlands, the tide pools, all just enamored me as a kid. And I never thought I could have a career path that is not only just working outdoors, but preserving a more that future, so that way we can see these things and you all get to see them as you're growing up too. Before I move on, I went to Humboldt State University after transferring from De Anza College. Go to community college first if that's interesting to you. I definitely recommend it. And at Humboldt State, my degree was in environmental management and protection with an emphasis in environmental education and interpretation. I also have a minor in marine science. So I just pretty much picked all the things that I wanted to do on the weekend and found a way to make that be my work week now too. So this is San Mateo County's Office of Sustainability. This is our mission statement. which I think encapsulates what Sean was sharing as well. The mission statement for the organization I work for is building a sustainable community that fulfills the needs of the present and the future. The website to learn more about the Office of Sustainability is on this slide, and I highly encourage you to check out how we're trying to work with people to build the sustainable future. And you can see the word community is in here because I can't do this alone. Sean and I can't do it alone. We need everyone in this space talking about this, taking action to have that future that we want to see. And I know you know this, but I wanted to show you that these are pictures taken in San Mateo County over the past 5 years, demonstrating that climate change is not just something in the future. This is something that's here right now that's impacting the way we live our lives. There's erosion in Pacifica, wildfires that break out in San Bruno, flooding in Redwood City, heat waves that are taking over the entire state, as well as sea level rise in Foster City. These are impacts of climate change that we are seeing change the way that we can get to school, the way that we are using local transportation to get up to the city. And they're going to change the way we live our lives in the future. It's not just something that's impacting the polar bears and the ice caps. It's something that's happening really close to home. It's going to change how our society functions, what's equitable in our future, and then also how our economy functions. So with this information in mind, I have the amazing privilege to work on the climate change team within the Office of Sustainability. My background is in education, and that's where my passion is, to communicate about these issues. And so I run these 2 programs that are all about climate change education with high school students. I'll talk a little bit more about them in the next few slides, but I also work with our Sustainability Academy. If you're interested in taking free online workshops to just learn about how to actually compost at home, you are more than welcome to check out Sustainability Academy and sign up for one of our virtual or in-person workshops, because we have to start somewhere. We have to figure out like what it looks like to change just a little bit, and those individual behavior changes are what we use to scaffold like Sustainability Academy. So definitely check that out. And like Sean mentioned, it's a huge equity issue right now, seeing how climate change is impacting different people, or climate change is impacting people differently. And so we need to see solutions that are equitable and thoughtful of the different communities that are getting hit first and worst with these climate impacts. With that in mind, I had the opportunity to start a racial equity and social justice work group within my office, and this is pursuing updating our internal processes so that way it actually is fair and just for everyone, and we know how to address the biggest issue in the room of communicating with people about these issues as it comes within the lens of equity. I also run our social media, so you could give us a follow on Instagram or Twitter. It's at SustainSMC. I would love to see you there, and we can keep the conversation going on that platform and see how we're communicating these huge issues on something that you can just scroll past on the internet. So I'm the volunteer coordinator for Sustainability Academy. I know Mark brought this up too, that volunteering is such an important part of getting into this, especially at your age. Volunteering at whatever is interesting to you with an organization that matters to you and has the same beliefs and thought processes that you do is so, so important. If you are in San Mateo County and are interested in volunteering, email me, we can find something for you, but this is just showing you what it looks like when people come together, even for like 2 hours on a Saturday, and pick up trash in the neighborhood that matters. Seeing us all come into spaces and dedicate time and passion to these projects just makes it happen in such a great way. And then, yes, like I mentioned, I'm the coordinator for the Racial Equity and Social Justice Work Group. This started in reaction to George Floyd's murder, and we have been developing better and more equitable internal processes. So that way, everyone in the Office of Sustainability, as well as every employee in San Mateo County, has tools and support to ensure that their programs and policies are equitable and just for all. Government has a history of being absolutely problematic in this space, and it needs updating, and it needs more people talking about it. And so this has been some of the most difficult work I have at the moment, but the most important, I feel, as well. And then, like I was alluding to, I run those education programs, the Youth Exploring Sea Level Rise Science, or abbreviated as YES program, which is a 2-week-long virtual, now in the pandemic, immersive science class experience. where we actually take a closer look at sea level rise and how that's going to change everything in San Mateo County. And then the Youth Climate Ambassador Program is a leadership program that I run. It's a year-long that you apply to, and it shows like the network that we have potential to grow within San Mateo County with youth leaders wanting to take climate action and be a climate ambassador through this program. All of the programs, all the conversations I have with people of any age start with understanding what is climate change, like what is the baseline that we're up against, looking at the impacts then, and then understanding solutions and inspire and hopefully working together to take action. This is how the Youth Climate Ambassador Program is set up, as well as, I mean, like a basic social media post that we're putting together, right? We have to make sure that we're starting and sharing that baseline information before we can start asking people, what do you think we should do next? Like we need to have that shared understanding of what we're up against and looking at the full scope of the problem. So that way we know what solutions make sense and how to kind of like keep going on all of this. All right, so I have a few more slides, but I think I'm going to stop sharing now because I would much rather talk to Sean and Ashita. So thanks everyone. I'll turn it back over to Ashita here to give us some more conversations.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Camille. I also have some questions for both of you. Our first question is, how can technology help prevent climate change in the future?
Gosh, I can go first if you don't mind, Sean.
Sure.
Great. For the YES program, the Youth Exploring Sea Level Rise Science, the way we have students explore that is through like augmented reality or like a sea level rise visualization tool. So you can actually see that it's not like 3 feet of water that's going to stack up nicely on top of itself right at our shorelines. It's 3 feet of water that's now able to move further inland and like affect how Highway 101 functions and how Caltrain functions. So I think tech in this space is really important to make the problem visible because we're predicting for the future. And it's like that future impact that we don't want to see, but we need to visualize now so we know how to solve it. Sean, what do you think?
Well, I love that, right? I love this. I love that project because I've heard about it, this visualizing exactly what it's going to look like, because it is very hard for us as human beings to do that. We're great storytellers, but that idea, it's very difficult for us to envision the impacts of climate change, but also, you know, we need to envision the solution, right? And so tech solutions, I mean, just anything, renewable energy. There's all kinds of technology now where that measures the energy that your building is using and says, oh, well, the lights are on in this room, turn them off, right? You don't need heat at this time of the day, so we're going to ratchet it down. So imagine that technology spread out over every building in San Mateo County, over every building in San Francisco. Those are huge energy savings. So I think that there's there's just so much tech, again, already out there. Right? You can just go to a store right now and buy a Nest smart home meter, right? That helps you monitor your lights and your energy in your own home. So that technology is out there, needs to be rolled out, scaled up, et cetera. So I mean, the technology behind battery recycling, right? We know that we're going to need, in order to totally get off fossil fuels, we need to have solar panels that charge a battery, and then we use the energy in that battery at night when the sun's not out. Well, batteries are toxic. How are we going to recycle all of that? They use precious metals. How do we develop better battery technology that has less of an environmental impact, even though we know that we're really going to need that technology? So there's so much going on in this space.
Yeah, and that's what's exciting about the future of all of this too, is that like, I don't even know where tech is going to sit into this, like, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 100 years from now. It's going to be amazing to see how tech innovates and communicates more and updates our processes and infrastructure. I'm so excited.
Yeah, thank you both for answering that question. I also have another question, which is, what are the most critical changes that we must make so that technology being produced is being implemented in our society quickly?
Money. What money and political will, those two things. Camille.
Yeah, I didn't mean to laugh, but yes, you're right. I think also like the passion behind what tech is being developed is also essential to make sure that it happens accordingly to meet the needs of the problems we're seeing right now. We need individuals to care enough to know that like this is where tech needs to go, and this is what I'm trying to pursue as a goal, or even just understanding like what we're afraid to lose, and understanding like what that problem looks like to me individually, and what tools I need to get to seeing something better, I think too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It happening quickly is such an interesting aspect of it that I'm struggling with.
Right. And I think that's some of the money part of it. So I talked about the Department of Energy projects. You know, they invest in a lot of technology that then gets rolled out. And so I think it is a government and market solution, right? I mean, our government invested a ton of money in getting those COVID vaccines ready and rolling out the door. And that is the role of government, to work together. It's not going to be completely market driven, right? We're going to have both us helping move this technology along and then the market helping to scale it up. But it is doable, right? That's like, it's doable.
So now I'm going to open up to the audience to ask any questions. So thank you all for answering these questions.
I actually had a question. I have two questions specifically to each speaker. Sean, you mentioned how, just in your childhood itself, you were prevented from taking classes as a woman. I'm very interested in knowing how maybe your work has been impacted by being a woman, or have you faced any discrimination in this industry, in the climate change industry, that you'd be comfortable talking about?
Yeah, well, okay, so a couple of things. I'm kind of old and grizzled, so I don't get it as much, but we got a bunch of funding from the Department of Energy several years ago to look at solar plus battery storage. How do we overcome regulatory barriers? How do we overcome financial barriers? Doing this big study for this. And we were presenting and we were having conferences, and invariably a lot of our younger staff who are female engineers working in renewable energy, the guys would walk in and go, where do I get a name tag? And I'd be like, she doesn't give you a name tag. She's going to tell you about photovoltaics. Sit down and shut up. I mean, it's like that kind of stuff still happens. There's still a little bit of this weird bias. One of the things for a long time, my job did not say senior environmental specialist. And I got to tell you, I would love to go into meetings with engineers and architects and pull that electrical engineering degree out of my back pocket. Like, who's seen West Side Story yet? Da-da-na-na-na. I mean, so that is still there. And I also see it. So if you're a person of color in this field, I think it is even worse, because the environmental movement for a long time, there has been a lack of diversity. And I'm not so much sure that it's really a lack of diversity as it is, Camille will know a lot about this, whose story gets told, right? I've done a lot of work in my job around making sure that other stories get told. Go to the city's website. We have like African-American environmentalists, Latinx environmentalists, because those people are out there doing the work. No one's talking about it. So yes, it's a little bit of an issue. It's gotten better. There's more work to do. We know we need to lift up those stories. We need to make this movement look like what it is, which is multicultural, multiracial, lots of genders, right? And again, that's about showing up. So yes, it is still happening. Not as bad as it was 40 years ago.
Yeah, and that's actually the perfect transition to my question to Ms. Camille, which was, could you talk about how race has affected the work for climate change and environmental action, and why you felt the need to start that workshop on social and racial justice?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I scroll through the news. There's a need right now. There's been a need for 450 years to do something differently, I think especially climate action, it's so obvious how inequitable the impacts of climate change are. Like you can see Pacific Island nations disappearing because of sea level rise. And then people are forced to migrate to San Mateo County from those places, maybe. And now they're experiencing sea level rise here because the only affordable housing is going to flood in 2030. How does that make sense? How does that sound like something that is like achievable and what we should be pursuing in local government? Like, oh, I'm getting like really heated about it. Sorry, this is such a great question, but I think just knowing the history of how government has fed into systemic racism in our country, and then seeing how climate change is hitting people of color first and worst, was a clear indicator that like we got to do something. We have to start gathering people and just hearing what other people in county government think about these things and what they want to see differently. So I think it's definitely in its first stages. Like it's just like getting comfortable talking about these things in the workplace has been a huge hurdle, but it's the beginning. We have to start just working on this, and there's lots of pressure points where we will be in meetings talking about these things and it becomes very personal, but that's what we need to see. Just like Sean was saying, like we need to share that grief together, and we need to use that to energize us and pull together the community that we do have as people of color, as people working in local government, as people who are worried about the future and want to see something better for everyone that's on this planet. Oh my gosh.
There's
Thank you
another
for sharing.
question from the audience, and it says, what do you think is the main impact on society from climate change?
Gosh. Yeah, what do you think, Sean?
You know, there is no part of society that will not be impacted by climate change. And I suppose it would be this idea of where people live, right? Like the main impact, everything, but specifically where we live. And just to build off Camille's thing, I go back to South Louisiana a lot. You know, I help my family with hurricanes, et cetera. And a couple, you know, one of the places where people are just having to move, right? The federal government is paying for people to move out of areas that are basically uninhabitable because of sea level rise, right? And saltwater intrusion. And of course, those people are people of color. So the first places that the federal government is helping people move away from their land is in South Louisiana and Alaska. And those are indigenous nations that are now having to pick up everything and move back. Part of the heartbreak of that story to me is that these are people who moved way down on the bayou so that they wouldn't get swept up in the Trail of Tears and be shipped to Oklahoma. So they're like, okay, well, fine, we'll move way down on the bayou. We'll get away from these white people. It's like, no, I guess it's unavoidable, right? White people are going to come and screw with you all the time. So those people are having to move. But what is really getting lost is the culture. Pacific Island nations, oh my God, what a dense and rich culture. South Louisiana, what a dense and rich culture. And so those are heartbreaking, right? That culture just dissolves as people moved from the Pacific Islands to San Mateo County, or they move to Houston, Texas, or they move to Phoenix, wherever they can move, that culture just dissolves. So sorry, I'm so wordy, but Camille, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the same thing. That's what I was going to bring up, is like the loss of culture and the loss of like how they historically have adapted to climate change, or seeing like, severe weather and how cultures have adapted to that, and how you can predict it in different indigenous communities, how they react, is like such a crucial part that will help us bring that into like the technological space of like how we adapt to climate change now. Like seeing how people historically have dealt with climate change and other extreme impacts, and understanding like where that fits into the modern world is so valuable. And if we keep shoving people into different land and not giving them a space to even be themselves, how can we expect the culture to exist, and how can we expect them to be a part of the conversation as we adapt to climate change in our county and anywhere? So yeah, it's a hard question, but it's going to impact pretty much every facet of our society.
Yeah, if there are any other questions from the audience, feel free to ask it now.
Hi, my name is Jason Blum. I'm a teacher in San Francisco. This is questions for Camille. Thanks, both of you. Also, Sean, for your presentations, very informative. So let me get the camera. At our school site, we have about 1,200 students, and the yard after lunch is left a mess a lot of times. And it starts in our own backyard. And I've been trying to mobilize and coming up with solutions to that. But do you work with school sites to help them start in their own backyard? And it's a teachable moment. And a lot of times plastics get put in the compost and a bin and all that. So it starts right here in our own backyard. And then as we grow up, we even see it on our highways and our city streets, all the trash. So we can start small and changing behaviors right here. So I'm wondering, do you work with school sites out of San Mateo to help mobilize them, come up with solutions and get kids really energized?
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's all I would love to do at work all the time. But definitely supporting students. Unfortunately, my job limits me to only serving San Mateo County schools. But I know there's programs like this throughout all the Bay Area. And it usually the most successful projects of like someone seeing waste at the school that's not being handled properly has students wanting to talk to each other about it and asking teachers for help, asking for like outside resources to maybe get better signage. Or I recently just helped a high school edit a video that they're playing at their morning announcements that gives like the 5 things that are usually served at lunch and which bin they go into. And then it's the student's face standing there at the bin watching you sort that really makes that behavior change solidified, right? So it's holding each other accountable and starting the conversation amongst your peers, which is a hard thing to do in high school. I know we're worried about like how we come off to each other, but this is where it starts, is holding each other accountable and sharing what you know and why this is important to know.
And I'm at a middle school, so
yeah. So Jason, what middle school are you in?
I'm at APG and NE.
Oh, okay. So the Department of the Environment does have a lot of educational resources. If you put
I've reached out and it's basically getting people mobilized at the school site with the kids and all that.
Yeah.
There's all, that's great and stuff. It's changing the mindset and getting people empowered and getting more and more people, because I end up cleaning up trash a lot at the school and sweeping up stuff. So it's not just that. And then it's getting a nucleus of people together.
Yeah. I love this video. I'm gonna.
So is there anybody in San Francisco? Because I've been in touch with sustainability and different things. I need somebody that could really help us motivate and get the kids on board.
Yeah. So let me just put my email here and contact me. I know we have a big project at APG and NE called Climate Action Now, which is more about greening stuff. They're planting trees there. But let me see what other kind of resources I can help you with.
It's mobilization at the school site.
Yeah.
And then for the students that are, the high school students on the call, like people care about this. It's just hearing you and finding like an adult that can support this to make it happen. Like this is just exactly like what Sean was saying. Like we need to start communicating about these things with each other, because maybe there is a middle schooler at Jason's school site that cares about this too and is worried and troubled by this. But if we're not talking to each other, how would we ever know? So, and then you saw how quickly Sean shared a resource and has a whole myriad of things to share. So
the packaging of the school lunches and all that type of stuff that could be compostable, but there's plastics all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and
all right, I'll email you, Sean. Thank you both very much.
Of course. Good luck,
I have to
Jason.
get going, and great job, everyone, for being involved.
Yeah, and thank you so much again, Sean and Camille, for sharing your experiences and to all of our audience questions. And so next, I would like to redirect to our next youth panelists, Ali Khan, Sophia Paula, and Oran O'Sullivan, moderated by TeenTechSF Vice President Harini.
So, hi everyone, welcome to the youth panel. We have Ali Khan, who is a UN Climate Summit rep and LEDA scholar, Sophia Rano and Kevin Rano Hernandez, who are Youth versus Apocalypse student leaders, and Aaron O'Sullivan, who is with the Carlmont Green Team co-president and a member of the Citizens Climate Lobby, Bay Area Youth Lobbyist Initiative, and Beyond Terra. So if we could just spotlight everyone. I think everyone's spotlighted. Okay, so hi everyone, go ahead and introduce yourselves, where you're calling from, what grade you're in, and a little bit about the organizations that you guys are involved in.
Hi, I'm Aaron O'Sullivan. I am a junior in high school at Carmont High School, and I'm part of a few organizations, as you heard, Beyond Terra, which has an emphasis on increasing biodiversity in the Bay Area. My school's Green Team, which is targeting more local action. Citizens Climate Lobby, which aims at more of the political side. So we lobby to politicians and hold rallies. And then a similar thing with the Bay Area Youth Lobbyists Initiative, basically tackling the more political side of things.
Hello everyone, I'm Ali. I am a 19-year-old high school senior. I'm from Chicago. So I founded the Make Book Club at my high school, which is a organization centered around youth that are pushing for environmentally sustainable actions in our school. I'm also part of an organization for Chicagoland area called It's Our Future, where this organization goes to councils, to boards to advocate for green reforms in their communities or cities, and also write newspapers and articles about the severity of the climate crisis and what we have to do and what we can do on our end. And that same organization has sponsored me to attend the UN Climate Summit, where I was a youth representative, to learn about what youth are doing around the world in their communities and what delegates are trying to do to mitigate the crisis in their own countries, and to take it back to my country, my communities, and to see what we can enact from our own end.
Thank you so much, guys, for being here to talk about the great work that you do. So I wanted to ask, how did you both get involved with climate action, and what is it that inspired you? Either one of you can go first, or if you want me to, yeah.
I can go first, I guess. So I guess going back to what inspired me, it was actually a pretty specific event. I used to spend a lot of time at my local library in Belmont, and one day I just noticed this random book, and it was written by Al Gore. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it. It's called An Inconvenient Truth. And that's exactly what climate change is. It's something that not a lot of people want to acknowledge as a problem, but we have to deal with it either way. And this is going to be the biggest fight our generation has to face. And we have to be the ones to solve it, as it's going to impact us the most. So that kind of inspired me to action, just knowing that if I want a future for myself and for my own generation, then I'm myself and other youth are going to have to be the ones to enact that change that we want to see. And I guess how I got involved was things kind of just fell into place after I joined my school's Green Team. They shared a bunch of resources, and it was really just making that effort to reach out to people. You know, these organizations are all out there, and so you just have to make that initial contact, and people are willing to, you know, we're all trying to work together on this. So people are willing to, you know, let you join, and it's, yeah, these resources are out there if you just make the time to look.
So for me, when I was a freshman, my teacher, who was my club sponsor for the MICBA Club, she was talking about the severity of the climate crisis and how it's impacting youth, and also her frustrations to our city and to the government officials that are not doing any action. And so it started to evolve from there, where then I started to learn more, just like read articles about the climate crisis, and then leading to founding the club that I started. And Yeah, and then from there, it's like once I started the club, organizations from my high school, from other high schools also reached out. So we're trying to collaborate with other projects. And this organization that sponsored me, they're also helping us on a project that led us to have me represent um, our district at the UN Summit.
Also, my apologies. It looks like I skipped Sophia, who doesn't have her video on, so it looks like we can't spotlight her. But if you're here, if you wanted to introduce yourself, and you can go ahead and unmute yourself and do that.
Sure. Hi. I'm so sorry, guys. My camera is broken. I'm not sure how to fix it. Maybe you guys could help me with your tech climate initiatives. But anyways, hi, I'm Sophia. I'm from Youth versus Apocalypse. I'm part of the lead circle, and I'm also currently running our anti-BlackRock campaign. I am Native and Mexican, and I am part of Youth versus Apocalypse. We're a climate justice group from the Bay Area. I'm from the East Bay, and I'm a senior in high school. And amongst other current issues. Oh no. Sorry, could you guys hear me?
I think you lagged out for a moment there. I wasn't sure if that was just me.
I'm so sorry. My connection's the worst. Where did I leave off?
I think you were talking about the organizations you're a part of, if you wanted to repeat that part.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm part of Youth versus Apocalypse. We're a climate justice organization hoping to amplify voices of youth of color. We have multiple different campaigns like hip hop and climate justice, as well as divest CalSTRS. And the campaign that I'm a part of, which is
I think that your audio has cut off again.
Yeah, I guess if you're on a computer, Sophia, if you'd like to continue your message, you could type responses in the chat.
For sure. And I could go ahead and read those out for you as well if you wanted. Okay, so I guess, Sophia, while you're typing it out in the chat, I think I will also ask the next question to the panelists. What do you think is the most significant accomplishment that you have made in your work?
I can start off if you don't mind. So for me, it's this past summer where my club was working on an initiative to install solar panels at our high school. And as we were working towards our goal, the Director of Energy and Sustainability of Chicago Public Schools, which is the third largest district in the nation, she came and she started to help us connect with other organizations, other to try to help us like with the funding and everything to sort of install these solar panels and help reach our goal. So at the end, we've secured the $13,000 grant, but the district rejected the funding. However, we recently found out that she had made like I think she got the funding to install solar panels at our high school, and in addition to that, she has invited me to speak to the Board of Education at Chicago Public Schools to advocate for the Chicago Public Schools Go Solar project, which will essentially install solar panels on all schools in the district.
Oh, wow, that's great. For for me, I'd say this past summer, this past August, One of my organizations, Citizens Climate Lobby, we organized a climate rally in San Mateo. It was called Students for a Carbon Fee and Dividend, which is essentially a tax on carbon. So basically, we were able to get a few hundred people to rally in San Mateo. And we even invited some big name politicians like our state senator, Josh Becker, a few keynote speakers, congressmen. So it was great. You know, we got to reach a lot of people. It was great seeing, you know, so many people who care about climate change, as well as our politicians, as at the end of the day, you know, they're deciding climate policy that affects us all. So, yeah.
That's so cool, Erin. I guess I could go next if that's okay with you guys. So
I think it'd be best if you type in the chat just in case, like, we don't know when you're gonna cut out for us or not.
I think since your audio cut out again, I can also just.
So what I was going to suggest, you guys, is maybe if Sophia can put things in the chat, and if Agnes can agree to give voice to Sophia so that we can use the technology that we have, but also amplify that. So Agnes, would you be willing to monitor the chat for Sophia's responses to the questions that Harina is asking and the discussion that's going on between Ali and Aaron, and just jump in, let Harini know when you want to give a response from Sophia. And I'd also encourage everybody on TeenTechSF leadership and also participants to put questions for Sophia and everyone else in the chat. So we'll just run everything concurrently. Agnes, are you okay to help support Sophia with being her voice?
Yes, yes.
Super, thanks.
Okay, so I guess while we're waiting on Sophia's answer, I can ask you guys, for the amazing work that you guys did, what were the sort of steps that it took for you to be able to get these projects approved and to get started on them? And how did you receive backing from others as well? Did you see that your project would take off like this? Also, like any tips as well, if you wanted to give to students who wanted to do this kind of work as well, you can answer that as well.
Okay, so for me, when I started the club, we were actually working on another project to bring beehives to add vibrance to our high school, but that was before COVID happened. So after COVID happened, we had to halt our work, and then over this past summer, we did the solar panel grants. But I think before we had to really like talk to you and create presentations and posters around the school to gather more students that are interested in this kind of work so that they can also take part of what we're doing to impact our school. And it's just all about reaching out and making posters, not even posters, like you can make presentations and share them with your school, or ask teachers to talk to their classes about such clubs that are going on if you need anyone to help with your work and push it forward. For our grant, I think my teacher reached out to some organizations, and then from there we started to type the grants and write about them to obtain them and to get approval. So my school, all high schools in Chicago have a local school council, which is like a sort of like a board with like teachers, parents, community members, and the principal, and one student representative, and I'm the student representative of mine. And so it was really, for me, it was relatively not difficult to advocate for this project and to get approval from the administration, considering that they were also very interested in the project. So that's also that was also very helpful on our part. So for backing, we didn't, since it's like the district responsibility, there was like no politicians involved. to obtain these grants or these projects for approval, but it was from the officials. So we got approval from the CPS officials until the vendor happened. But then after that, we had successfully obtained the funds after the director of energy sustainability reached out and got the funds to install them from CPS themselves.
I don't know. I can go next for Sophia. She typed in the chat that the most meaningful experience I've had in climate justice is the first climate strike I've led in San Francisco. It was for Stop Line 3, which is especially important to me. Oh. Well, hi, I'm Sophia. I'm part of the Youth versus Apocalypse and the leader of the Divest BlackRock campaign. I'm also one of the social media coordinators. The most meaningful experience I've had in climate justice is the first climate strike I've led in San Francisco. It was for Stop Line 3, which is especially important to me. It was so amazing to see so many powerful youth stand up for what they believe in.
Yeah, so as I'm sure Sophia knows, when you're planning a climate strike or a climate rally, a lot has to go into it other than just, telling people to gather in a place at one time. You have to get permits, you have to reach out to people, make sure that people are actually going to come, make sure that it's safe, that you have like a designated route and everything. So when my group was planning our rally back in August, it took about a year of planning actually to get it all together, especially having to reach out to politicians. So kind of like what Ollie was saying as well, just like reaching out to people and networking, because a lot of the time it's not necessarily like what you yourself can do, but someone who knows another person who just happens to have the funds or the resources to be able to organize these things. So we reached out to hundreds of people to get money for our like park permits and everything. And sometimes this stuff all takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So just sticking with it and not giving up after that first barrier, because we had a lot of politicians reject us, probably twice as many as that agreed to actually come. So sometimes it's just persevering.
It's so inspiring to hear the amount of work that all of you have put into this. This next question, it's related to social media. So how have you and others around you leveraged tech or tools for online connectivity to organize and further your goals of environmental justice? Or maybe if there's any examples of cool projects that use any sort of technology to bring about environmental justice as well.
For my initiatives, we hadn't actually utilized our social media tools because it was a relatively small group working on the project. But for our upcoming projects, like promoting reusable water bottle usage, while also talking about the negatives about using non-reusable those plastic water bottles to. And we're gonna promote that by having posters around the school, but also on social media, like having my high school's Instagram page talk about these initiatives. We're also going to make sure that for past initiatives that they're also going to be spreading that as well, so that students are more engaged and they're more they're more knowledgeable about what's happening in our high school. And also these other high school pages of like the senior classes or other classes too, like our Google Classrooms. We have a classroom for each of the class years, to posting initiatives or projects in those classrooms in the future, so for students to know what's happening in our high school, so that they're more informed and they can also take part if students are interested or not. Because right now, the lack of social media attention in my high school about the initiatives we're doing is a lot. And so this will hopefully mitigate this will hopefully increase the amount of participation we have in not only my organizations, but other organizations in my high school as well.
Agnes, if you wanted to read Sophia's answer.
Yes. She says, definitely, we've definitely used Zoom a lot. We also use Instagram and TikTok, which is popular with our members. Social media is a powerful tool. powerful too, and we make sure to spread correct information to educate and inform our members and followers. We also use social media to promote our events and actions.
Yeah, definitely. Like Sophia said, Zoom has definitely been a huge, played a huge role in all of climate action this past year, in the year of COVID. I honestly don't think I've had more than 2 or 3 in-person meetings for most of my organizations. They've all been over Zoom, and it's great because you can reach people, all across California and all across the country and the world even, and it's like you're in the same room. So it's great. And then, like she said as well, using Instagram to promote education and events. I'm sure a lot of people heard about, our rallies through social media and Instagram, stuff like that. So it's amazing how many people you can reach nowadays.
Yeah, as TeenTechSF, that's something that we've definitely seen as well through using Zoom and social media platforms. We've been able to have like a far wider range of attendees from even different countries who usually wouldn't have been able to make it. So I want to say thank you all for coming here to join our panel and talk about your experiences and your work as youth leaders. I think that it's very important for other youth to hear about this as well, so they know that there's steps that they can take and that they can make a difference too.
Yeah. And so thank you so much to our youth panelists for sharing with us. I'm sure that we can all take inspiration from their experiences. If there are any audience questions, I believe we'll be taking that right now. But seeing that there are no questions, I would like to redirect our attention to 2 of our Civic Hackathon winners. In October earlier this year, TeenTechSF hosted a Civic Hackathon where we invited teenagers to create solutions to the issue of COVID-19 recovery. Our winners will be pitching live right now, starting off with Teen COVID Lender.
Hello, I think it is two of us here from Team 21. So could you just give us a few minutes for us to decide who's gonna do the slides between just the 2 of us?
Sure, we can give your team a few minutes to prepare if you want to talk with each other. Is the other team that's here ready to present?
Yeah, so Team Chatbot Violet, would you like to start?
For sure. I just need 1 quick minute to share my screen since I have a presentation. Thank you.
Brian, while everybody's getting set up, maybe you could talk a little bit about TeenTechSF for any of the participants in the Global Youth Summit today who don't know about it and might want to get more involved.
Yeah, so I wanted to thank Varshini, who's our recruitment initiative lead, for giving a wonderful introduction and already describing a little bit about our organization. But to reiterate, our mission is to provide equal access to tech for all teens, because diversity fuels innovation. And so what we do is we, as our team leadership team, organizes major events such as our Civic Hackathon, Global Youth Summit, and STEM Inclusivity Forum in order to provide access so that everyone gets equal access to tech. And when we were offline and on site, we would have these events in easily accessible areas or in the middle of underserved communities, or in tech headquarters, where we would provide transportation options for students in underserved communities to be able to go directly to a tech headquarters and see what it's like inside. And so we really want to help bridge the digital divide, and we've been continuing and even expanded our programs while being online due to COVID. And so for our recent civic hackathon, which was in October, I believe it was the weekend of October 10th. Our focus this year was on tech for COVID recovery. And so some of our prompts are focusing on how to address mental health, physical health, accessibility challenges relating to access to COVID resources, and making sure that real information about the vaccine and about how how we can get out of this pandemic can get out. And there are some other prompts that we gave to our panelists, or to our over a dozen teams that participated in creating tech projects. And so at this event, we're highlighting the work of two of those teams. And I'm guessing that one of those teams is ready to present now.
Of course, so I can go first. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, wonderful. So hello everybody, my name is Azka Siddiqui, and today I'm going to be presenting my chatbot Violet to give you the support you need during the COVID-19 pandemic. So our problem, according to the CDC, 40.9% of survey respondents have at least one adverse mental or behavioral health condition, such as anxiety disorders or depressive disorders, which 30.9% of people have, trauma and stressor-related disorder, TSRD, related to the pandemic, 26.3% of people have, and having started or increased substance use to cope with stress or emotions in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, 13.3% of people. Those who have seriously considered suicide 30 days before completed the survey are 10.7% of people, of which 18 to 24-year-olds make up 25.5%, and in terms of minority and racial/ethnic groups, Hispanic respondents responded 18.6%, and non-Hispanic Black respondents were 15.1%. As you can see, we have a very big amount of people struggling with mental health issues. So our solution to combat this problem is our chatbot Violet. Our chatbot Violet allows users to safely vent their emotions without fear of judgment, and it has built-in supportive messages and provides links and resources to people according to their needs. Our chatbot is highly modular and highly expandable and can be updated with more emotions, responses, and resources. Some of our competition is Doable and Talkspace. Both of them are both confined to one website solely focused on mental health. And not everyone who is depressed knows it or actively seeks help, so it doesn't really work. And expensive and involves connecting with therapists focused on mental health, such as Slack and a bunch of other ones. Our chatbot also has a wider spectrum of unique users and targets who don't know and aren't actively seeking help. We're free and the users remain anonymous. There's no paperwork needed, and we always refer to free treatments, such as we recommend music playlists, meditation sites, and we also give official suicide prevention lines, etc., etc. Our target audience is definitely those who are financially unable to afford in-person professional therapy or have economic disparity, and even those who belong to a racial or cultural group that don't encourage discussions about emotions or consider a taboo. We also target those who are self-conscious about seeking in-person help due to unsupportive family or those who are raised in a toxic environment. We also target those who are below the age required for professional and/or official therapy. Social media has been thriving a lot due to quarantine, and technology is improving at an incredible rate. As you can see, we have a statistic here with change in internet
traffic seen by Cloudflare, and it is rising very, very much. And most websites that our chatbot can be incorporated to can be accessed for free, such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, many more as well. Here we have an example of our coding for our happy branch. So if you're feeling happy, this is what the thing would be. Thank you for your time. That's all.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Next, we will be moving on to the next Sage team. And so that will be our Team COVID Lender. Are you ready, Team COVID Lender?
Yeah, we're ready. So,
Okay, wonderful.
Crystal, do you want to screen share?
Hi, so are you sharing your screen?
No, I'm not. I was just asking Crystal if she wanted to screen share.
All right, sure. So our team made COVID Lender, the friend who lends you a hand. And our team was Kate, Divya, Harshita, me, and Shervin. So the problem that we were targeting was a confusion of quarantine dates after traveling and all the travel bans and rules and regulations that different countries have. So we know that some countries have different quarantine dates and how long you need to stay, and it kept on changing. So we know that there's a lot, people are very social and we like to interact, and a lot of families and travelers wanted to visit their friends or family or have business meetings, but you're struggling to do this because of travel restrictions. You're not sure quarantine dates, and there are a bunch of problems regarding dates and times. So the solution we came up with was COVID Lender, which pretty much keeps track of the quarantine dates and times, and it puts a calendar into your phone and calculates how long you need to travel based on the countries that you're traveling to and from, and provides advice based on the country's current situation.
Crystal, are you hearing your sound? Or because I can't hear it.
Is the audio not connected?
It's not.
Can anyone else hear the video?
Okay. You might need to try resharing your screen. And when you do so, at the bottom left of the pop-up, there's a checkbox that says share sound.
All right, okay.
Hi everyone, I'm here with our app demo video for COVID Lender. When you open up our app, you'll be directed to the home screen, which will show you the logo and a little blurb about our app. Down here, you can access the navigation buttons. By clicking on the home button right here, you'll be navigated to the home screen, which we are on currently. And by clicking the pen, you'll be navigated to the personalization screen. Here, the user will then be able to pick what country they're traveling from. So your departure country, let's say it's India, and their arrival country, so the country that they're traveling to. Let's just say they're traveling to the US. And then down here, the user can then choose what date they'll be arriving in the country. So let's say they're arriving on December 10th of 2021. They can then hit OK, get some info. This will just give them some general info about which visitors are allowed to go into that country and what some regulations may be. And then by hitting go, what the app then does, it automatically generates an event in the user's default calendar app. And what it does is it automatically calculates the number of days that the user would need to quarantine themselves. And by doing so, the user can just hit save and then plan other events on their vacation accordingly. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm here with our app demo.
How is our product unique from existing solutions? It has a user-friendly interface. It tackles a very precise problem of tricky like quarantine dates. It has simple navigation tools like you saw in the project demo. It has collaboration capabilities with Google Calendar. It also provides unique advice and information based on the country's current COVID-19 situation, and it offers state-of-the-art portability and accessibility for all audiences. We made this app using Java for backend. We used Android Studio for the user interface. We used GitHub and the other apps you can see on the screen. Our future plans for this app is to add more countries with their appropriate information, because we just hard-coded this app, so it doesn't have every single country in it and all their information. We also want to increase the amount and depth of the information that we provide according to each country. And in the calendar event, if the user has to stay in a certain place for their quarantine. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, that was such a wonderful presentation. Please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. Yeah, so how long did it take to make this?
To make the actual app, it was like the time that was given, like the 2 days for the hackathon, I'm pretty sure.
Wow, and what inspired you to make this app?
We actually, as a team, on the first of the hackathon, we all like collaborated and brainstormed, and this idea was actually based off Crystal's idea. She actually brought up this idea of like confusing quarantine times. So we just brainstormed and looked for ideas that might be more relevant to today's situation.
Yeah, so the inspiration behind it was kind of, we knew that a lot of people really like to travel, and we also knew that the regulations and like quarantine times were really confusing, and some people didn't know how long if they wanted to travel. So that was kind of the reason for the idea.
Wow, and so another question we have is, what software did you use? I believe you had a slide for that, so if you want to go back to that, that'd be great too.
Yeah. And then also, if you click the logo, I'm pretty sure you can access our like the code for GitHub. So we could share the link if you'd like, if you want to access the software.
Can you see the GitHub stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so we just kind of pushed the code to GitHub so everyone could access it and contribute.
That's wonderful. Yeah, collaboration is key here. Okay, and we'll be taking any other questions. So please feel free to put them in the chat. But seeing none, we can move on to the next component of our events. So first off, thank you so much, guys, for that wonderful pitch. We loved seeing you at the Civic Hackathon. And like our adult mentor, Julie said, anyone who's interested Our civic hackathon happens around August each year, so you should definitely attend that if you liked hearing these pitches. But now that we've gone through all, let's hear some messages from people around the globe and how they're stepping up to help with sustainability. First up, we have Madhav Venkatesh, CTO at Trustrace in India.
My name is Madhav. I'm the CTO and co-founder at Trustrace. We are a product traceability company helping fashion brands to become more sustainable. Now, I'm going to talk about how technology is helping us to build a more sustainable and a more equitable future. And for this discussion, I'm going to use the food industry and how food industry is adopting technology to produce food in a more sustainable way to feed the 8 billion population of this planet. Now, if you look at the tuna fish, it's one of the most unsustainable fish from how it is farmed and how it is caught. It has a significant impact on the diversity of marine life in the areas where tuna fishes are grown and where they are caught. Now, technologies like blockchain are helping people to establish provenance of this tuna fish and helping us to understand where the fish is coming from and whether it was produced and caught in a sustainable way or not. Similarly, if you look at farming methods, things like Internet of Technologies have introduced precision agriculture, wherein the farmers can produce more products, but by using lesser water and lesser pesticides. Similarly, if you look at how food grains are being graded and sorted today, again, technologies like artificial intelligence, vision technologies are helping people to sort products or grains better so that the food wastages are getting really reduced. Now, if you look at Africa, today, thanks to artificial intelligence, farmers are able to use a simple phone with a simple camera to identify whether their crops are being infested. And also, once they know that a crop is infested, they get recommendation on what type of pests are attacking them and what is a better method to manage the pests. Now, all of this is helping people who are marginalized, and helping to solve problems at scale. And these are just samples, right? I think if you go and search for such inspirations, I'm sure you will find a lot of them. So technology is the way forward of how we can make the world a better place to live. Thank you so much. Bye.
We loved hearing that international video message. And we have our second international video message, which is
Hi, my name is Mark.
which is also from India, and it's from an organization called Hara Jeevan India.
Warm greetings to all. I hope you guys are doing okay. So I'm Pakistani, a 19-year-old teenager, like you perhaps, pursuing international relations in India. Let me begin by saying that I have witnessed my childhood days in lush green areas. Currently, I reside in New Delhi, which is the national capital of India, and also at the bottom of the air quality index, hovering between the poor and hazardous categories. It is after I came here that I realized how much I missed the greenery and the fresh air. This AQI, coupled with carbon footprints and heaps of waste, mainly plastic, further strengthened my resolve to join hands with the change makers that were determined to improve human lives. Hence, I began my journey back to nature and became a part of Hara Jeevan. So Hara Jeevan is a 6-year-old organization started in 2015. We work on native tree plantation, waste management, composting, urban forests, restoring the ecology, and spreading awareness through outreach programs and campaigns. Through Hara Jeevan, we associate with schools to target the youth for sensitizing them with broad topics such as waste management and increasing green cover, and also urging them to perform eco-friendly activities at school. We hold awareness workshops and various campaigns at schools for students. Locally, we hold door-to-door prototype sport or for malls or for public places that require them. Our generation is creative after all. Finally, I would like to end this by thanking Ms. Varshini from TeenTech for this platform and opportunity. We are the future, and this discussion that we are having, I think it's been long overdue. So it is amazing to see the initiative being taken up. Because after all, we are the ones that are going to be benefited through this. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the people that filmed video messages for us across the world. And now, since we're running out of time, we want to make sure that we get to our workshops. So I'm going to open up 2 different breakout rooms. And if you want to go to the machine learning workshop, then you can join room 1. And if you want to go to the 3D design workshop, then you can go into room 2. So yeah, go
Why
ahead.
don't we keep one of the workshops in the main session?
Yeah, actually, wait, that's a good idea. Okay, so if you want to go to the 3D design one, then just go to room 2. Okay, we can get started shortly. Let me just share my screen. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, I'll take that as a yes, and I'll start recording this workshop. Okay, so welcome everyone to the machine learning crash course. So just to give a brief overview on what machine learning is. Basically, the premise is just to learn from examples and data and then apply that gained knowledge into different and unique scenarios. So to give an example of that, it would be to learn from previous historical data on which kind of people are more susceptible to cancer, and then using those data, we can then apply to future predictions. So by looking at someone's health records, we can predict if they're more susceptible to cancer or no. Okay, so there are some key terms that we should understand in order to understand how machine learning works. So there is this term called labels, which basically means that we're trying to label a prediction on each of the set data we get. So for the previous example I talked about, the label would be the prediction we're putting on a person, whether they're more susceptible to cancer or not. And the features will be the input data. So input data can be separated into different categories, like let's say height, weight, heart disease, and some other things like that. And yeah, examples are also very important to understand. So there's 2 kinds of examples. The first one is a labeled example. So this is more important in the training part because our machine learning models can see which kinds of features match with which kinds of labels. And then we can match them together to see if our prediction is right. Unlabeled examples is also good, but it's mainly for testing because we want to use these unlabeled examples to our advantage, right? We want to take these into our models and then produce a prediction on our own. Okay. And there are also different models that we can be using depending on the scenario that's presented. So for the regression model, we're basically predicting continuous values. So what that means is we could, for example, see how well students are doing at school, and we can predict what their final grade will be, something like that. And classification model would be to predict discrete values. So this I will explain a little bit more later, but it basically produces a value between 0 and 1. So this would fall into the cancer one, where we're predicting if they have cancer or if they don't have cancer. Okay, so we can start off with linear regression. Linear regression is basically an algorithm that's used to find a linear relationship between features and labels. So I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with this formula, y equals mx plus b. This is basically a simple way of actually just using machine learning and predicting some values. We can input the data as x, and then depending on the slope that we get and the b value, we can produce a y value. And something that's also very important for machine learning is to train and then take care of the difference between our predicted value and the actual value. So loss is a term that describes that. Loss is basically a number indicating the prediction's accuracy. And as you can see, the formula for that might seem a little bit confusing, but I'll try and explain. So basically what we're doing is here you can see that we're doing y minus prediction x. What that means is we're basically subtracting the actual value from the value we predicted so that we can get the value of difference between those two and see how much loss we have. And we're going to square it since it might become negative. And then we want to accumulate all of those losses and divide it by how many ever inputs we have so that we get an average loss of our data set. And also, just in case you guys have any questions, then you guys can send in the chat and I can respond to those. So training is also very important since we're going to try to learn optimal values for the M and the B value that I just talked about and the different weights of the features so that we can minimize the loss. So there are several ways that we can reduce the loss. So after collecting how much loss our model has, there's 3 different ways where we can decrease that value. So the first one is called gradient descent, and a lot of different scientists actually use this one. This is probably the most common one, and it's basically an algorithm that calculates the minimum. So as you can see on the right, there's basically a graph between loss and the value of the weights. So I will get a starting point. This is where my loss is currently. And then I will adjust the value of my weights. So basically weights are the M value and then the B value. So I can slowly adjust those and see where my loss ends up. So let's say my loss ends up here. So it's closer to where there will be 0 loss, which is around here. So if that's true, then I'll keep on moving the weights down so that I approach this, this lowest point. So that's how the gradient descent works. And stochastic gradient descent is also kind of similar. Basically, it's the same concept, but except we are trying to take one input at a time. And you can imagine how this will take like much longer than the first one, since we're gonna take one data point at once. So let's say if I have 1,000 inputs, I would have to run 1,000 times. So this strategy isn't the best, but it can be useful in some cases. And a mini batch stochastic gradient descent is basically taking a smaller batch of data instead of all of it. So here in gradient descent, we're basically taking the loss of the entire batch of data we have. And mini batch stochastic gradient descent is basically taking part of it. So we have the advantage of having not just one data point, but also some of it without it taking so long. Sure, I can send the presentation link in a second. Can you guys see my screen or? Okay, so I'll continue. Okay, so one of the most popular devices that scientists will use for machine learning is called TensorFlow. So basically, it's an open source platform for machine learning. And open source basically means that not only can the developers access TensorFlow, everyone in the public can also use it. So this is just a small graph to explain how it works. So we have different classes, keras, layers, losses, metrics. So these are basically the main functions that we're going to be using. And these are the things that manage CPU, GPU, and TPU. Okay, so using TensorFlow, we need to have some hyperparameters. Basically what that means is, in addition to the weights that we're doing, we also want to have other variables to control how our machine learning model is learning. So the first one is called learning rate. Basically what this means is we're gonna see how much we're gonna step by. So if you try and remember the graph that I showed with the parabola like this and the loss, the learning rate basically controls how much we're gonna go by every time. So this is important because if we overshoot the learning rate, then the loss will go from here all the way to the other side and it will be also too high. And we want the right learning rate so that it goes slowly to the center and then swings backwards until it kind of finalizes at the lowest point. So that's why learning rates is also very important. Epochs is basically a term that describes how many times you want to train the algorithm. So each time we try to minimize the loss. And the batch size, as I explained before, it kind of controls like how many examples I want to take with my batch. Okay, so generalization is basically a term that describes how complex a model is. And the less complex the model is, the more accurate the results will be. And it kind of sounds like contradicting, but in theory, it is very true. Because if the model is too complex, then it will overfit to the training data. What that means is our model will only predict the right results for the data that are labeled. So for example, in the cancer case, if my data for training that are all labeled are of old women, and my model is very, very good at overfitting and predicting the right results for old women, then when new data sets come, let's say a young boy, then they wouldn't be able to predict that case well. So actually, the less complex the model is, the more accurate the results will be. And examples must be drawn independently from the data set, and the distribution within the data should remain the same. So what that means is we have different kinds of people. So as I said, like elderlies, we have adults, we could have teenagers, and we don't want all of the same group of people in the same kind of data set. So when we're training, we want to separate our data sets into two kinds. So the first kind is called training. So this trains our models. And the second one is called testing. So after our model is trained, we want to make sure that our models are predicting the right results. So that's why we want to use the model to check with the test data to see if we're actually predicting the right results. So the distribution within those two data sets should remain the same. We shouldn't have all the teenagers in the training data and all of the elderlies in the test data, or else our model will be very inaccurate. Okay, so I kind of explained before about the training data and the test data. And something to keep in mind is that the larger the training set, the stronger the model will be. And the reason is because the more data that we can train with, the more our model will learn and adapt to different situations. So the more data we have, our model will be stronger and stronger. And the larger data set basically means that we have more things to test our model with. So as you can see, there will be more confidence in evaluation. And we should never train our model with the test data because we want to save that for checking how accurate our model is. Okay, so you might be wondering, we already have 2 sets. Why do we also need a validation set? So this is also important because we want to make sure that, again, it doesn't overfit to just the training set and the test data. We want another set called validation set so that after we test out our models and then we tweak with it, we can test it again based on the validation set. Okay, so I can just pause here really quickly for any questions. And yeah, you guys can type it out in the chat. Okay, it looks like there aren't any questions, so I'll keep moving on. Okay, so representation is also very important in machine learning. There is this term called feature engineering, and what it does is we want to take in the raw data we get. So it's normally in like Google Sheets, Excel sheets, and we want to take that and we want to change it so that it works better with our machine learning models. So there's this term called one hot encoding, which basically turns strings, which are basically words, to floats that are numbers. So it's harder for our computer to work with words than it is to numbers because we can take those numbers and we can easily use them to calculate stuff. And words are kind of hard to do so. So something that machine learning scientists do is that, let's say the input is shorebird way. So as you can see on the right, that is the street name of one of our, like, let's say one of our families. So then we can take that word and then we can change it into numbers. So there is this data type in computer science, which is called a vector or a list. So it keeps track of a list of all the numbers. In this case, we can have and generate a new and unique list for each word. So in this case, shorebird way can be simplified into a bunch of zeros and ones. So this is why one hot encoding is so important. And we also want to choose good features. What this means is we don't want to have unclear features. So let's say we have an input data that has all of the information about a teenage boy, but it is not labeled or it is not clear if they ever had cancer or not. Then it would be bad to include that in our data set because it's not clear to us and it can have 0 values. So yeah, and also binning is also very important because when we want to group things together very easily for the computer to test out, we use binning so that we can kind of use a graph and see like where values are, and then we can group them together so that it's easier for the computer to calculate. Okay, so regularization is also very important for machine learning. Basically, what we want to do is we want to decrease the complexity, as I mentioned before. So this is an equation for how to basically decrease or reduce the chances of overfitting. So we basically want to minimize the loss and at the same time the complexity of the model. So there is this very common formula called the L2 regularization formula that basically minimizes overfitting. So basically what it does is it's kind of collects all of the different values of the weights. So as you can see before, that would be the Y value, that would be the B value, and then we want to basically minimize that. Okay, so we're going on to logistic regression, which is different from linear regression. Linear regression, as I said, can produce values that are not just between 0 and 1. But in this case, logistic regression have to calculate values that are 0 or 1. So we're going to use something called a sigmoid function, which you can see on the right. And basically what that does is if you graph it on, let's say Desmos, you can see that the line kind of goes from this, and then it goes up, and then it kind of stops at when y is 1 and when y is 0. So that ensures that our value that we generate is going to be between 0 and 1. Yeah. Okay. So in linear regression, we use something called square loss, right? We squared the different differences between the right value and then our predicted value. And in logistic regression, we're going to use something called the log loss. And even though even if you haven't learned about log, it can be explainable. So basically what we're doing is we are subtracting 1 from our predicted value. So let's say we predict that this patient doesn't have cancer, so that'd be 0. So 1 minus 0 would be 1. And because we predicted 0, then this whole section would also be 1. And it kind of puts everything together and generates out a loss value so that we can try to minimize it to improve our model. Okay, so along with logistic regression, we also use classification. So what this does is logistic regression returns a probability between 0 and 1. And we use the classification model to turn that probability into a binary classification between 0 and 1. So for example, if my model generates out the percentage 0.67, then that would mean that there's a 67% chance that this person has cancer. Then we use that value and we turn it into either yes, he has cancer, or no, he doesn't have cancer. So that's basically what classification is. And we can also evaluate the model by testing our accuracy. Because the values we're getting are either yes or no's, we can see how many numbers of correct predictions we have over how many total predictions we're making. So this kind of goes into a dynamic of how we can truly see if our model is accurate, because let's say all of our models are basically predicting that no, this person has no cancer, and all of our data sets are similar. None of the data sets we're getting actually have people that have cancer. So even though that our model is just predicting no every time, the accuracy is actually very high. So if we use the strategy before, then it wouldn't really work. So we have these 4 different values that can ensure that our model is actually accurate. So a true positive is basically when our model predicted that it's a positive and the data actually shows that it's positive. And a false positive means that our model predicted positive, but it was actually negative, so we got it wrong. And a false negative basically means that our model predicted negative and it was actually positive, so we got it wrong again. And a true negative is when our model predicted negative and it was actually negative. So there's 2 different ways that we can calculate accuracy. The first one is called precision. So this would be out of how many times we predicted positive did we get it right. So this would be true positive over true positive plus false positive. This basically means out of all of the positive values in our data set, how many did we predict is true? And the same thing goes for recall. What proportion of actual positives were identified correctly? So this would be true positive plus false negative. And we're basically seeing how many of the values are actually correct in the data set, and also we predicted it. Okay, so in classification, there is a prediction bias. This basically means how far apart the two averages are. The averages basically come from our predictions and our labels. So after we calculate the bias, we can kind of identify that either our data set has a problem or our data set is okay. Okay, and I'll take a break right now to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, looks like there's no, oops. Yeah, looks like there's no questions, so we're gonna move along. Okay, so all the complicated stuff are basically logistic regression and linear regression. And neural networks is also very challenging to understand. So another way to make more complex models is through neural networks. And this is different from the linear models that we were talking about because this one is nonlinear and it comes from an activation function. Basically, that means we're going to generate something that doesn't always follow along. So if you have learned this in middle school, you can understand that a linear regression model kind of goes like a straight line. So depending on how much value the y is getting increased, it's going to proportionally increase the x value. But a nonlinear function is different. Even if y values are getting incremented by 1, x values might not be always incrementing by the same number. So this is helpful because we can have more kinds of results. And neural networks also have things called hidden layers, which are basically layers in the model that produce an output, which becomes another input layer. So before we were just predicting a value. So using the data set that we have, we want to predict if, like, let's say a percentage, whether a person has cancer or not. In this case, we're gonna send in our results as the input as to another layer of testing. This kind of ensures that our accuracy goes up. Okay, so there are different kinds of neural networks. The first one is called multi-class neural networks, and there's two kinds. So multi-class neural networks is basically something that can classify a lot of things at the same time. So before I have a program that predicts if someone has cancer. Using neural networks, we can have a multi-class version of that. So let's say we could now predict if a person has cancer, if they have a heart disease, if they have pneumonia, something like that. We can predict different results at the same time. So the first way to do that is something called one versus all. And what that does is we're going to build separate classifiers for each case. So before we have one classifier for the cancer case, we're going to build 3 for pneumonia, heart disease, and cancer. And this could be bad because if we have a lot of different cases, then we're going to build up the storage in our computer, right? We're going to have to build a lot of different classifiers. Softmax is another approach to this. And we're going to build one classifier that basically generates a value out of between 0 and 1. And it's basically going to be a decimal probability. And using that probability, we then sort out into, okay, whether this is pneumonia, whether this is heart disease or cancer. So softmax can be more beneficial when there are a lot of different cases because we don't have to keep building different classifiers for different cases. And it looks like we're running out of time, so I'm just gonna skip through these harder ones. Okay, so I think this is pretty important for anyone that's trying to learn more about machine learning. Data dependencies are basically something you want to make sure of when you're kind of testing with your model. So reliability is basically standing for if our data set is reliable. If we got our data set from a very unreliable website, then some of our inputs might be flawed, and it would be bad because then if we are pushing it into a website, then we'll be predicting wrong values. Versioning is also very important because let's say we got data from a very old website and it doesn't actually match with all of the data sets that we have in the real world right now. Then our model will be out of date and it will also predict different results. Necessity is also very important because when you have too much data, then it'll be very bad for the computer and it'll take a long time to process all of these things. So we want to make sure that the data we actually need is going to be included and we don't need irrelevant information. So let's say where somebody lives when we're predicting cancer, that's not very important. So we want to make sure that we leave those data out so that we can include more important information. Correlation is also very important. It's kind of similar to necessity. It basically stands for if the data inputs are actually important in producing the right result. So in this case, where someone lives does not correlate to whether they can have cancer or not. And feedback loops are basically something that takes in user feedback to see if our model is actually still predicting the right results on the website. And if we are not, then we want to make sure we're changing things. And I will just talk about the last slide, machine learning systems in the real world. So as I said before, there could be cancer prediction, but also literature, surprisingly. A lot of people can use machine learning models to predict next word predictions. So when you're typing on your phone and something pops up on the top of your keyboard that says, okay, you might be able to just click on that and it matches the word that you're going to say next. That's using machine learning models. And it could also be applied to different books. So by seeing which sentence comes from a certain book, we can identify and see, okay, this kind of sentence and this kind of writing style is mostly common in this kind of literature. So machine learning systems can be applied to a lot of different things. And we're basically done here. If you guys have any questions, then you guys are free to ask them. But for now, I'm going to stop this screen share. And is everyone back from here? I'm just going to close all of the rooms. Okay, so meanwhile, you guys can take a stretch break really quickly. And once everyone's back, we can get started with the Kahoot. Yeah, so feedback loops are basically something that machine learning scientists can use to get feedback from the users. So let's say you launch your machine learning model onto a website and people are using it on the daily. Feedback loops are basically something to ensure that the users are actually getting the right results from your website. So they could, you could keep collecting data from your website and seeing if the result they want matches the prediction you have and keep on improving your model based on that. Okay, looks like everyone's back from the workshops. I'll hand it over to Varshini, our retainment and recruitment lead, to get started with the Kahoot.
Yeah, so thank you for those wonderful workshops, everyone. We are going to play a quick Kahoot right now. So please open up kahoot.it and you can go. to this game pin, which I will put in the chat. TeenTechSF student leaders, you can also join in here if you'd like.
So technically, Kahoot making allows you to not have to enter in your real name, but if you'd like to be able to win a prize, I believe it's a t-shirt, then we need to know who you are to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But if you don't really, if a prize isn't something you're looking for, that's fine.
Yeah, and I'm gonna wait for a couple more minutes for everyone to sort of join in, but yeah. Okay, so let's start. Who created the first computer program? Lord Byron, Charles Babbage, Danielle Bernoulli, and Ada Lovelace. Oh, okay. A display unit of information equivalent to one alphabetic letter or symbol. Int, char, boolean, and float. We know our computer here, wow. Okay. How many pounds of meat does an average American per year consume? 133, 233, 144, and 244. 144. Wow, a lot of people are getting these right. How many animals are endangered on the IUCN Red List that are threatened with extinction? Okay, great. How many plastic bags do we use in a year? 2 trillion, 7 trillion, 10 trillion, and 5 trillion. 5 trillion. Okay. Multi-select. So what are the most endangered animals? The Javan rhinoceros, the eastern gorilla, the mountain gorilla, and the vaquita. Okay. And then the next question is, what is the most common type of trash that is thrown away? Glass bottles, paper products and cardboards, metals, and plastic bags. Yeah. Okay. Everyone thought it was plastic bags, which is surprising, but it's actually paper products and cardboards. What popular company did not start from a garage? Yeah, it's IBM. How much of the world's water is available for human use? Okay, a lot of people know this, but it's 3%. Okay. What's the most commonly used programming language in the world? Oh, one person got this right, but it is JavaScript. Okay, Ashita is on the lead. Okay. And so the next question is, what's the worst nuclear tragedy in history? Yes, it is Chernobyl. How many trees are cut down each day just to produce toilet paper? $30,000. Can you believe that? How many generations of computers have been invented? It is 5. Rainforests are cut down at the rate of? "100 acres per minute." Which of these is not a greenhouse gas? Yes, it is not carbon, but it's carbon dioxide. And so that's like a kind of a tricky one, but water vapor is a greenhouse gas. It is carbon and not carbon dioxide, which is not a greenhouse gas. How many animal species have been extinct in the last 5 centuries? $16,306 is right. Which of the following sources of energy is not renewable? Petroleum, so most of us got that. Ashita has kept the lead for a really long time. But second to last place has a streak with 3 correct answers, so getting close. What country produces the most energy in the world? It is China. How many wildfires were there in California in 2021? Over 8,000. The last question, how many cities in the US will be underwater in 2050? It is 10. 10 cities will be underwater. Divya. Satya. And Ashita for first place. There we go. But to the winners who, to our 3 winners, please private message us if you would like the prize for it, and then we can be in contact and give you a TeenTechSF shirt and other merch. So yeah, thank you for that. Thanks so much for playing.
Yeah, thank you, Varshini, for hosting the Kahoot. And I'll hereby now end the Global Youth Summit for this year. I'd like to thank our sponsors and partners at Youth Funding, Youth Ideas, YFYI, the San Francisco Environment, and the Office of Sustainability from the County of San Mateo, the Nature Conservancy, Girls Who Code, Make School, Facebook, Hour of Code, Bling, Trustrace, and also Harajivan. So yeah, thank you so much for coming. We hope you enjoyed all of our events. And here I will send in a short link for a sign up for our leadership team if you're interested in helping planning with us. We have 3 different branches, so even if you don't know coding, then you can help us with finance or communication outreach, or we can also teach you how to make your own workshops. So if you're interested in helping us plan all of these events, then you can sign up for our leadership forum there. And yeah, I think a recording of this and some of other resources will be sent out in a later email. And other than that, if you guys don't have any questions, then we can end this event. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, and if you're a TeenTechSF student leader, or if you're interested in joining our leadership team and have questions, I'd recommend that you stay back